We join KASM Radio's SWCD Partyline in progress, featuring Dennis Fuchs, Mark Lefebvre, and Chris Hogge.
And, of course, Dennis, the gentleman in the middle here, you want to really focus on him today, right?
Yeah, that's why we brought him with. We wanted to focus on Mark Lefebvre, and I'll have him introduce himself.
So I'm Mark Lefebvre, nutrient management specialist with the Stern Soil and Water District. I primarily work on the Ag Water Quality Certification Program.
Okay.
So we'll get into some discussion, I guess.
We'll get into some discussion. You bet. On SWCD Partyline again, brought to you by Wimmer Opticians and Atlas Family Chiropractic. Gentlemen, we have about 7 minutes. And Dennis, let's preface Mark here a little bit and the importance of his role at Soil and Water.
Yeah, so Mark was originally hired 15 years ago as our nutrient management specialist, and Mark's been involved with farming, grew up on a farm, a dairy farm over by Otsego, went to the University of Minnesota, worked for crop consulting, co-op, seed sales, and just very well-rounded with agriculture, and gets along great with farmers and understands agriculture and what it takes to get field operations done, which is very handy working in the soil and water business. We don't want to be pushing farmers into an area where they got to take a lot of extra risk. And Mark has been on the team now for 15 years. And then in the last, 6 years now, he's our Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program assessment specialist, and really knows how to sit down with farmers and go through the process of reviewing your field operations for every crop, every field, and if you score high enough, you can get certified. Mm-hmm. And the certification protects you from any future regulatory from the state or feds and associated with agriculture. And that's just something that provides farmers some security and some good feeling that they don't have to worry about future regulations. And then it also gives recognition to the farmer. They get a sign at the end of their driveway, and just to let people that are driving by that this person is doing everything they possibly can to protect our resources, which is what we're all about.
Yeah,
and protecting your resources also means sustaining your farm. And that goes back to Mark's background in agriculture and coming up with ways to address any resource concerns that also make sure that you're protecting your profitability of the farm. So those are just some of the things that Mark brings to the table when he visits with farmers. So we're very excited about this Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. Even the USDA now has recently got more involved with recognizing farmers that are certified, and the Conservation Stewardship Program and the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. There's a lot of demand for these funds. My gosh, there just isn't enough money to go around, and there's so many farmers that are strapped for financial resources that really want to utilize this to address their resource concerns. So as a way to kind of score higher or better amongst people that have applied, being Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certified is a way to get those extra points to help push you in that right area. So I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit, Chris, about some of the angles you're moving there.
Well, we have identified in the Waite Park customer service team area that it is a good addition to the planning process to maybe insert the Ag Water Quality Certification process, because this assists us in kind of the same direction we're headed as far as the 9 steps of planning. We basically ask the same questions, we just don't dig into it with the same amount of detail. So in our team, we're going to look at maybe going more the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification questions to work with producers to get them Ag Water Quality certified. That way, when it comes around to ranking and scoring, there are questions that ask whether they are Ag Water Quality certified, and those questions will increase the points potential that they could get and could possibly help them get funded. And that makes it a pretty beneficial for the producer. It also puts in a few additional practices, such as cover crops or a field windbreak, or sometimes pollinator habitat if it fits into the situation. No-till or strip-till are also other good options that we can utilize. So it's just a beneficial step. It documents what we're looking for and can give a better overall plan for the producer to work off of.
So Chris mentioned earlier the 9 steps of planning. And,
That's right.
Yeah. So the radio listeners are probably going, okay, so there's 9 steps out there. What the heck are they? So I just called them up here, Chris, if you don't have them off the top of your head, but I'm sure you probably could. The first one is identify problems and opportunities on your farm.
Correct.
And number 2 is to determine your objectives. So as part of the planning process, we like to sit down with the farmer, the son and daughter, and try to figure out exactly what they want to achieve out there. And then you do an inventory of the resources. That's step number 3, where you take a look at all the fields. And this is part of that Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification. Every field, every crop, if there's a gully or if there's too much tillage going on, or we should be doing a better job of nutrient management, those are the things that we'll do as part of the inventory. Number 4, analyze the resource data. So this is when you kind of pull the stuff together and take a look at it and define what the existing conditions are for the natural resources. And then 5 is formulate the alternatives. This is where you start laying out different ways. Should I got some erosion here. Should I reduce tillage and do some cover crops, or should I do reduce tillage and maybe a water and sediment basin or a grass waterway? So there's a variety of options out there. And then number 7 is make decisions. That's when the rubber hits the road. And number 8 is implement the plan. Some people would say that's when the rubber hits the road. And then 9 is evaluate the plan. And that's something Mark and I were doing. The final status review is year 9 of, let's say we put an animal waste management system in. Year 9 of after that's installed, Mark and I go out there and see how well the practice is functioning. And then we also talk about the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. And if there's any changes, we've collected information from farmers that said, this clean-out ramp should have had curbs on the side so I can tell if my spreader is moving one way or the other. So we get some really good advice from our farmers when we do that, evaluate the plan. Randy?
Yep, we will talk more with the gentleman from Soil and Water this morning. It's news time from M&N. Soil and Water Conservation, our party line guests this morning here on KASM. Randy Rothstein in for Brad Melke. We have Dennis Fuchs, Mark Lefebvre, Chris Hogge in studio with us. And Dennis, we really want to focus on Mark's job and what he does for farmers at Soil and Water. And so with that, we're going to let him do some talking this morning.
Well, yeah, let me just kind of give him the intro here. So right now, farmers are getting ready to take corn silage off, and boy, I tell you, there's some guys that already got a couple fields opened up and ready to, I think in the next 2 weeks, we're going to see a lot of corn silage coming off. And one of the things that Mark's going to talk about is some of the challenges in getting certified, and he's going to share with him some of the observations, and there's some opportunity here now, and we got some programs available, so he's going to cover that. And maybe the listeners, if they got any questions, have them call.
Well, and I've got a question before maybe Mark can answer this too, because being a farmer 30 years ago, there was not a lot of this around. And now, is it out of necessity that they do this? Is there some rules and regulations that are maybe making farmers do some of this, or what's going on?
Well, I guess I think it's probably more awareness. There's a lot more awareness for sustainability, as a term that's being used by a lot of the food producers, the milk co-ops, Land O'Lakes, those kinds of people, they're getting some of that from their customers. Their consumers are asking for some of that information. Right. How is my food produced? So I think there's some push from that side of it. So, the water quality certification program is one way to kind of verify, what the farmer is doing.
Sure.
Because it looks at the field physical characteristics, the slopes, the soils. It looks at what they're doing for tillage, what they're doing for nutrient management, making the right applications of either manure or fertilizer, using the University of Minnesota as the guidelines, their recommendations. What you do for pest management, weeds and insects. And then if the field has any conservation practices, or if it has tile or irrigation can affect the score, but you need this 8.5 score at the end of the.
Sure. It sounds like a daunting task for, I mean, a small farmer, maybe not, but a larger farmer, a big project, isn't it?
Yeah. The one thing that a lot of the farms have is they are getting better at record keeping, I think. Either they're working with a private crop consultant maybe, or their co-op agronomist keeps track of where their applications are on the fields. So if they are willing to share that with me, that's half the battle probably to
Sure.
get started with this assessment. And we do kind of look at the those 9 steps of planning. It's very similar, maybe on a different level, but we're all getting kind of at the same goal, is to look at what the farmer's doing and hopefully make suggestions on maybe some different options if you don't get to that 8.5 score. Generally, I think one of the things that probably keeps farms from being certified is the tillage score. And it's usually conventional tillage is a 2 score, and that's 25% of the score for this assessment. So if you're doing like a fall ripping and field cultivating or disking several times in the spring for seedbed prep, you're probably going to get to that score of 2.
Okay.
So that's a first discussion that I typically try to do, and those are hard ones to have with farmers because a lot of that is from their dad and their grandpa. To change some of those things, is a social thing as much as anything,
Right.
almost.
Right.
But we have those discussions. I try to present different options to try to get it, improvements.
Yeah.
So, Mark, tillage is one thing. What were the other components in it you're scoring?
So it's nutrient management, pest management, and then if the field has irrigation, tile, and conservation practices can adjust the scores up.
Put a number on this, if you would. We know the size of Stearns County. We know Stearns County has a lot of farms on it yet.
Yep.
What kind of participation rate are you getting right now? And where in your minds, I'm sure you'd like to see 100% participation, but where would you like to see this go?
Yeah, we've got some specialized programs now, and now with NRCS possibly helping with some of the assessment work, because yes, it is a time-consuming process, but we're getting better at it, I think. So I think in Stearns we've got around, just under 200,
Okay.
people that have applied, and we've got around 70 or so that are certified.
Got it. Okay.
So that's kind of where we're at today, and we're trying to build on that. In fact, I was just on a conference call before I came here, and Land O'Lakes is actually interested in, they've got a tool they call Truterra that tracks everything that the farm does, each pass across the field, that will integrate into the water quality certification program. There's an API, they call it.
Sure.
I'm sure what that means.
Application Programming Interface,
Yeah, there you go.
API.
Dennis is a big acronym
The boss
guy.
knows
Yeah,
that.
he's an acronym guy, I tell you. Yeah.
So if that happens, industry is kind of on board with this kind of thing too, as a metric for sustainability. So it's really looking good, I think, in the future, especially when we get industry involved.
Sure. So you're saying right now, the farmer listening out there, record keeping, boy, so helpful going into this process, isn't it? How do you begin? Where do you start with record keeping at home right now? What do you do?
Well, a lot of people just keep track of it on a calendar or something, where the manure applications went, where fertilizer was. I think it is getting better. But yeah, there's always room for improvement. And I know a lot of farmers don't get into farming to do paperwork, but it is a necessary thing to be able to track what's going on.
Sure.
To help you decide what's better options maybe for the future.
All right. Chris, you want to chime in here?
But we have staff in the office that will help them organize some of the documents they have or the ones that they need to gather for us to get that stuff done. So folks will help them get where they need to be. It's not just something where you bring your documentation and it's all prepped and ready and we just crunch the numbers and call it good. We can also help them with what types of information and where we can get that information from. So it's not just a path that you lead on your own. So for all producers that are interested, it's just something that you just got to contact the office, and we'll put you on the list. And I think it's a first come first serve type of a deal, and we work our way through it.
So this is for farms with, let's say, continuous acres and farms that maybe have acres all over the county.
Yep. Yeah. So the assessment, we do like to do the land they own and operate, as well as rented land.
Okay.
So we will look at that. And I've certified everything from small vegetable farms to big corn, soybean operations with and sugar beets and everything. So it's A to Z, I guess.
Sure.
So I was just going to say, one of the, going back to tillage is one of the things that is a problem for some farmers to get over as a hurdle. Let's talk a little bit about corn silage and some of the options out there. You got manure to get out there. We want to see cover crops. How do you work this, Mark?
So when I originally, get the initial assessment, maybe if I'm doing a water quality certification, working with a farmer on that, look at the results, and we see that tillage score is really what's limiting them to get to the 8.5. So we talk about different options. And the one thing we try to do is we look at soil health, because this assessment is a risk runoff tool.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to talk about what can we do to improve infiltration when we do get these big rains, and these 4 basic principles for improving soil health are really key to that. And the first one is keep the soil covered as much as possible. So that'd be either cover crops, crop residue, reducing tillage, or perennials. Alfalfa in your rotation is like a conservation practice almost in itself.
Yeah.
Those years in that assessment when are usually certified, but it's the corn year typically that isn't, because there's more nutrients applied to it, more tillage. So that's the low scoring crop.
Got
typically.
it. Yeah.
The next thing is disturb the soil as little as possible. So that would be trying to reduce that tillage. Maybe you look at an inline ripper or something as opposed to a big disc ripper, where you're totally inverting the soil, or a moldboard plow or something. Try to reduce those trips. The next one is keep plants growing throughout the year to feed the soil, and that would be where cover crops would come in. There's a lot of period during the year, especially in something like an annual cropping system, corn, soybean rotation, where there's no living plants out there. And that's one of the ideas of cover crops, that they improve and feed the soil, the actual organisms in the soil, the mycorrhizae and all this fungi and stuff like that, to improve the structure so that water infiltrates through better. And then the final one is diversify as much as possible using crop rotations, cover crops, your rotation. Rather than just corn and soybean, we know that if you include a small grain in there, even though it might not be financially the best thing sometimes, it can improve both the weed control from resistance weeds, as well as the following crops.
Sure.
Cash crops.
So, yeah, Dennis, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask Mark, let's pretend I'm a farmer that's going to be taking corn silage off later this week. And what are my options after corn silage? What should I be doing? I've got to get my manure injected out there sometime before I start doing soybeans, and before I start doing harvesting corn stalks for bedding. And I've got all this stuff going on, Mark. Now, how am I going to work this in?
So there's several farms, lots of farmers been adopting this over the past, I'd say it's gaining momentum the past 2 years, but there's some that have been doing it for 10, 15. So the the recipe, so to speak, that I've seen successful has been to, right as soon as that corn silage is off, is to plant a cover crop right behind the chopper if you can.
Wow.
I know the logistics are difficult, but I've been working with some ag retailers to try to see if they can do that on a custom basis, or we do have vendor lists that have farmers that might have a no-till drill or something like that. So follow that with a cover crop, and cereal rye or oats is probably the best option. Cereal rye if it's getting later, into October. oats is a little bit wimpy, I think, but this year might be a year, that corn silage is coming off a little earlier. Maybe a better maybe an option to be able to get some oats out there or cereal rye. So get that planted, whether you no-till drill it or broadcast it with a fertilizer spreader and use light tillage, vertical tillage or light disking or something like that would be probably faster. And then inject the manure into that later, because it just seems like if you wait for the custom manure applicator, they don't know when they're going to show up. It's difficult to get that cover crop seeded after that. And I've seen that work. And there's custom applicators that have low disturbance toolbars, sweeps, that kind of thing, that can go right into that rye if it's growing, and won't kill it, actually. It just still lets it come back and gives you more cover out
That
there.
is such an interesting conversation, because I've had talks with farmers, and of course their manure management plan says we need ground from manure, we need and that cover crop never comes into the conversation. So doing that before manure, it makes sense.
Yeah,
it does.
Putting solid manure is a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Unless especially if you didn't, there's little opportunity to incorporate that. But maybe in that situation, you move that to a different field, or there's different things that can be done to accommodate either the liquid or solid manure, depending on what the farm has. So,
Wow.
It just seems like it works better. And most people are scared not to do that deep tillage. I think they're going over the fields with those heavy wagons or trucks, possibly big choppers, and you're getting some compaction. And yeah, the last 2 years, I will admit, have been brutal for that. It's just been a tough falls, with all the rain, and fields get rutted up. But the deepest tillage then might be just the drag hose with sweep injection, and then just let that be over winter, and then either spray that off with Roundup or till it to terminate that cover crop in the spring, or take feed for it. Take it for harvest it for silage. You probably want to adjust the seeding rate higher on that cereal rye. That would probably come off maybe the end of May, right around when first crop is about, maybe a little after that, and then come back with either no-till soybeans into that, or a shorter season corn silage variety, or possibly there's some farms trying sorghum Sudan grass, those kinds of things, and it frees up some acres for manure application throughout the summer and some other things, and has a little different quality feed, that rye silage.
Yeah.
One of the questions I hear from farmers too, or concerns, is if they don't do that tillage, it's not going to dry out in the spring. It's just, I'm not going to be able to get out there and get things done when I need to. Mark and I and an egg retailer, a friend of ours, was out at Spring Hill, and these are some very heavy soils out there.
Yep.
They don't call it Spring Hill for nothing. And we were impressed. This person put cereal rye in the fall. It was greening up in the spring. We're walking around out there, and we weren't gathering mud on our shoes. We could drive the truck out there. And there was other areas where it was just slimy on the top, where it was moldboard plow and nothing was growing, and there's no soil health. And that, talking about that soil health, and it does take a couple of years for everything to fall into place. But when it does, you are really going to see some advantages to your farm and productivity, and getting these operations done when you need to.
Sure. Now, Mark, you talked about corn silage and the chop, following that up with a cover crop. What about when beans come off a little later, or you're combining corn a little later? And farmers are liking to clean up their fields right now. They're baling everything, putting them in bales, and they like to see their fields black in the fall. What's your recommendation with that?
Yeah, I'd prefer to leave that residue out there, but I get why it's removed for bedding and whatnot. There's more farms that are just they're no tilling, or even just a double disc drill behind the combine even. They're finding that seems to be working, especially the past couple years, as opposed to interseeding.
Sure.
There's been a lot of aerial, people trying aerial seeding.
Maybe during the growing season.
During the growing season, like,
Okay.
yeah, or even now on some corn that would be taken for grain, aerial seed rye, cereal rye, or even soybeans when the leaves are starting to drop a little bit. And then after you take that crop off, it's going to grow. You're just throwing seed out there, so it's a little risky. It's you're going to have some failures.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these guys have gone actually to just going in and drilling it following harvest. Yeah, it's late. I wouldn't do the multi-species things with radishes and some of that fancy stuff. I would say stay to just something like cereal rye. It seems like even if it comes up a little bit this fall, and I've seen cereal rye come up, it's planted in November and it actually grows.
Quick germination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably the latest thing that's going to germinate with that cold of soil temps, and it does, comes up in the spring. So it's, and that is a concern for some people, that how do you terminate that? Then all of a sudden it grows in the spring. It's a weed, right?
Yeah.
But there is ways to take it out, either with herbicide or, with some tillage. So
Okay.
it
All right.
can be done.
So we have about 4 minutes left, Mark. If somebody wants to start this process with you, what do
Give
they
us
do?
a call.
Yeah.
Call our office, or email, and we get you on the list. We'll get you signed up for whatever you're interested in. We've got a lot of different targeted funds to help pay for some of these people to try things,
Sure.
because that's kind of what that's for. Cover crops in particular, since we're talking about that. We've got some programming to reimburse farmers or a straight payment rate, depending on where they're located. We've got some special areas in drinking water supply management areas and some other targeted areas, but we can figure that part out, on what best to try to get them some dollars to try some of these new things, to take the edge off and the risk out of it maybe a little bit for 2-3 years, and then hopefully they see the benefit and we'll run with it after that. Because the farmers are the ones that are going to figure out how to do this.
Absolutely.
We can give them recipes and talk about different options and things, depending on what they have for equipment and everything else, their cropping system. But that's our goal, is to give them a little financial assistance and let them run with it.
And get to know your co-op and what they would
Yes.
like to see the product from your farm, right?
Yeah, we really are starting to partner with some of the co-ops, and surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, I guess. I mean, they are really buying into it, I think, because they're hearing it from their customers as well, and from sort of the motherland of lakes, or as a way to put it. Because that's what their consumers are starting to ask for, that kind of thing.
Certainly. Chris, you got something you want to add yet here before we wrap things up?
Oh, the last thing I want to add from my side is that if you call the office and you want to get involved in the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification, we'd be more than happy to come out into the field to meet with you. Our staff, we're really looking to go back, at least in the team, we're looking to go back to where NRCS made our name, and that was with the handshake and the one-on-one interaction with producers in the field. So I'm really encouraging my staff to be out in the field talking with producers as often as possible and getting out of the office. So that's the goal from our side.
The telephone number for the office is 320-251-7800, and we're at extension 3. So, or you can look us up online, Stearns County SWCD. Google it, and we'll pop up. And then we do have telephone numbers for everyone on the staff, but the general office number is 320-251-7800, extension 3.
And Mark, are you doing in-person appointments, or are you meeting farmers on their farm, or what are you doing?
Yep. Yeah. There's people call in, and I'll meet them out on the farm. That seems like it's probably the best way to go.
Yep.
COVID and everything else. Most people don't want to come to the office, and we can have them come in if they happen to be in town. But yeah.
And Dennis?
And I just want to remind farmers out there that do get certified. Third Street Brewery is providing a 12-pack of beer, Minnesota Gold, because you folks are setting the gold standard and protecting our resources.
Wow.
And not only in Stearns County, but Grant Pearson, our certification specialist, work in a 12-county area from Benton to Big Stone, from Todd County down to Canyo High. He also has access to the 12-pack of beer and providing similar assistance as Mark does across the 12-county area. So give us a call. We really want to. This is so far. I think we got a great opportunity on these corn silage acres to get some cover crops out there. We got some programs available. We got some technical assistance. We're ready to help.
Awesome. Thank you for coming in today, Chris Hogge, Mark Lefebvre, Dennis Fuchs. Dennis, you're back on October the 1st, so a month from now.
Yep, exactly. Thanks for having us back.
Absolutely. And this program available on your website. We'll pass that over to Dennis, and you'll put it on your website so you can listen to the program if you so choose. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for being in this morning here on SWCD Partyline, brought to you by Wimmer Opticians, your optical experts in St. Cloud, and Atlas Family Chiropractic in Wade Park.